Hi everyone, I would like to record a little bit of a tutorial for the arcade vehicle system that's been taking so long time. Many people asked about it, how to set up the vehicles for this plugin and stuff, so I will be showing this in this video. And this video will be only focused on the blueprint side because the vehicles are obviously written fully in C++, but they are accessible from blueprints, and most of people will just want to kind of create blueprints for them. Yeah, so basically let's get into it. I'm gonna launch with the blank project of Unreal Engine 5, but the plugin is also available for Unreal Engine 4.26 and 4.27. So I'm launching on Unreal Engine 5. That doesn't make any difference for the setup or anything like it. There is literally no difference in the code or anything for Unreal Engine 5. So I'm gonna launch the blank project with the blueprints only, without C++. Should be good enough. I'm just gonna quickly name it maybe arcade vehicle system tutorial project. So just to show you a little bit that it's completely launching it from completely blank project without any previously set up things. So cool. We've got this empty project here now. And as I said, I launched the blueprint project, but it doesn't matter whether it's a blueprint or C++ project at all. So, first of all, what we want to do here is I want to show you that there is already a bunch of blueprints for the vehicles available that you can just drag and drop pretty much. Well, not exactly, but almost. And so you can use those. You don't have to create your blueprint and set up the components from scratch. If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine. To access those vehicles blueprints, they are in the content of the plugin. So basically, you gotta go to your content browser. If we don't have one, you just go here, content browser, any of those, and just go to yeah, okay, so you might not see the plugins content if you're new to Unreal Engine or something. You can basically push this button, settings, and make sure you've got show plugin content ticked. So it will show you plugins content. So you go to choose path, you select the engine. It's a little bit misleading, but that's the way it is. So open up the engine, then plugins, and then you'll be able to see oh, sorry, yeah. One more step before that is actually enable the plugin. That was a little bit stupid. So, arcade vehicle system. Obviously, this is available for you if you purchase the plugin first. So, keep that in mind. I'm gonna enable the plugin, relaunch the project, and let's start over with this. Yeah, so the plugin should be launched now. Should be all good to go. So again, just make sure that the plugin content is ticked over here. So again, you just go to this folder here, engine, plugins, and you try to find arcade vehicle system content. So basically, you unfold that, or actually you can click on this and you'll have the content browser open right on them. So basically you have the blueprints, curves, levels. I'm just gonna briefly explain a little bit about that. So animations, this folder actually contains the animations for the skeletal meshes, because this plugin actually allows you to have vehicles that are either skeletal meshes or static meshes. I do recommend using static meshes over skeletal meshes if you can, because they're just cheaper. Unreal Engine is able to instantiate reduce the amount of draw calls for the static meshes, which it can't do for the skeletal meshes, whether they are deforming or not. So skeletal meshes are supported just because I know that a lot of people in Unreal Engine community uses skeletal meshes for the vehicles, because the original Unreal Engine vehicles support skeletal meshes by default. So that's one thing. So first when I created this plugin, there was just skeletal meshes available. Now there is also static meshes. So that's something to keep in mind, that you have those two options. I do recommend static meshes, but there is the same support. There will be no difference in driving or anything like it. It's just more optimal, in my opinion, to have static meshes rather than skeletal mesh. Unless you have some vehicles that are deforming or something, then you probably have already some technology of your own. But yeah, if you are using skeletal meshes, you've got some animations here, and those are just three simple vehicles that I had set up for the plugin at the beginning. There is I'm gonna skip the blueprints for it because this is the most important one, but the curves, vehicles system, it relies on the curves. So basically, you can set up how vehicles are kind of accelerating depending on what speed. So for example, it's 100 kilometers per hour. It will just have an arbitrary value of 100 or something, and then it will just kind of fall down as your speed increases. So so you can set up the curves for your vehicle. There's also braking curve. So for example, this one is completely flat, but you can have a curve that, for example, braking is, I don't know, somewhat weaker when you're running with high speeds, and somewhat a little bit stronger when you are with low speeds. If you want to, there's a lot. Those vehicles are not fully like physics vehicles. They're arcade vehicles. They're very much kinematic rather than physical. So therefore, you have a lot of control over that. So there is engine braking curve, and obviously they have engine braking features, so that when you just release all the buttons and you don't press the spacebar or add any braking input, it will basically use the engine braking, so it will kind of slow down the car gradually. And you can also set up how much this engine braking works, how is this force kind of spread between depending on how fast you're running currently. Reversing curve, again, there is a reverse gear on the vehicles, and you might want to have it weaker or stronger but slower than the forward gear. So and keep in mind that this plugin is very simple. It doesn't have any controller of like gearbox or anything like this. So if you want something like that, you would probably want to set it up yourself or code it yourself. There might be something like this coming up in the future for this system, but it's not yet just given to you. But you can still drive it. So steering curve is again the same. The horizontal axis, as always, is speed, and this is like arbitrary force. So if, as you can see on this curve, when you're running slower, you can basically turn slower, and then when you run faster, it just depends on your game, really. There is, as you saw, there is some simple tank setup that I just wanted to take a look if I'm actually able to do it with this plugin. Frankly, it kind of works. But yeah, there is a tank acceleration curve. It's very flat, pretty much. Yeah, there are some example curves. Of course, feel free to create your own. It's all up to you. Levels. There is an example level that will actually open up. It doesn't have a lot of things really. It just has this simple track here. Yeah, that's just it. Like, you don't really have that's just some example level here. Whether you can use it to test the vehicles or not, whatever you want. Oops. Then we have meshes, and again we've got the basic, which is the skeletal mesh, and there is a static mesh for this car. So this is equivalent. This is the same basically mesh, just this one is used for the skeletal mesh version of the car, and then it's for static. So I just wanted to all you to have kind of view of how they're created and how they're built. Casual car, this is just static mesh because this was the car that was created for me by some freelancer just for the purposes of this plugin, and I just wanted to have a static mesh, so it's enough to like have those skeletals so that you can take a look. There's also a sport car that has skeletal and static mesh. Yeah, those are just pretty much the just the example cars and stuff. You may want or may not want to use them. And vehicle track is obviously just some stupid meshes that belong to this track here. So I'm gonna go into blueprints now. So I split the blueprints because their setup is quite different in terms of they have just different component, right? So so there is a skeletal mesh vehicle kind of controller component that calculates all the physics and stuff, and there's also one for the static mesh. There is no difference between them. They kind of are derived in the code from the same class that calculates the physics. There is just some little bits and pieces in the code that I wanted to split up between those two. For example, wheels on the skeletal meshes of the cars are done through the skeleton. So basically there is like animation blueprint. You can see there are bones for the wheels, and those bones are rotated by the animation blueprints. Whereas if you have a static mesh, you obviously do not have any animation blueprints for the static meshes, because that's just for the skeletal meshes. So so those skeletal meshes, in order for them to work, they need to have, if you set up your own vehicle, it needs to have those sockets here in the static mesh. Their naming doesn't matter, but you just need to remember the naming, because you then need to put it into the vehicle component for it to recognize them. And therefore, yeah, you just set up some sockets like that, and then those sockets are rotated by the code, and that's how actually the static mesh vehicles work, and their wheels are rotated and stuff. You can take a look at how it's set up in here, but yeah. And just again, for the skeletal meshes, again, as I said before, there are bonds. So there is with the skeletal meshes, it's a little bit more fiddly, because there is some requirement. So you need to have a vehicle base bone, which is like just the root bone. It doesn't do anything at all, right? But then you also have a suspension bone, and then based on the children of the suspension bone are the wheels. So the way it works, this base doesn't move. It moves just with the car. It just doesn't rotate or anything. The suspension, however, is used by the animation blueprints to kind of, when you turn around and stuff, then the vehicle kind of can go like that or like that when you accelerate or brake. And that's why you need the suspension bone. So basically, root, and then you get suspension. They're located at the same position, but the suspension bone is used by the animation blueprint, so to kind of tilt and move the body of the car. And then you have those children of the suspension as well. It's important for those bones to be children of the suspension, because the suspension is kind of relative to that. As in normal cars, you obviously have wheels attached to the springs, and springs attached to the body, and all this suspension system. So yeah, then you have those for bones, and again, this setup is exactly the same as it is in Unreal or original Unreal Engine vehicles. So if you download any skeletal meshes for the vehicles on the Unreal Engine marketplace, that they probably will work. I cannot guarantee, obviously, because I do not take responsibility of how other people do their meshes, but it seems that that's the standard for now. However, I would encourage you to not use the skeletal meshes and just do the static meshes instead. It's just much simpler setup and much more optimal, and you can optimize it much better. And yeah, so that would be it for that. What else did I want to say? Yes, I think pretty much it for the mesh setup. And you can see this. There's the skeletal meshes. They use animation blueprints, which is a little bit more a little bit nicer to use, because you can manipulate the bones and stuff. So for those blueprint guys that don't use C++, it's probably gonna be easier for you to use skeletal meshes to do some animations, because as you can see, for example, in this vehicle, I added some additional bone here. It doesn't interfere with wheels because wheels are rotated separately by the system, so you can have as many bones as you want and as many wheels as you want. But the swing arm, I added here just to kind of have, you know, swing arm is kind of moving like that. Yeah, so that was just some playing around with this. And there's also a tank vehicle, which, as you can see, it's got a lot of bones actually. So there's, I think, 4 or 5 each side. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 4 each side. And they work the same way again. The base, suspension, and then the wheels bones. So that would be it. And as you can see, the static mesh of the tank also has. Oh, I didn't set it up. Okay, so I guess I don't have an example. Yeah, but you would just put the sockets here for it to work. But yeah, kind of got lost somewhere. So yeah, getting back to blueprints, skeletal vehicles. If I go in here, I open up, and again, as I said, the skeletal meshes were introduced first to the plugin, and there is just the old green vehicles that I created myself, and I'm not really 3D artist, as you can see. So, but they work. So I guess that's the idea here. So for the skeletal meshes, that's the only example that I have. But for the static meshes, there's also those other better looking vehicles. So yeah, I just opened skeletal basic, and then you have skeletal no camera, skeletal buggy, skeletal no camera. And the reason why each of those blueprints are with camera, without camera, with camera, without camera, and with camera, without camera, is because this plugin also has some cool camera for the vehicles already set up. It's also called. It's also part of the plugin. It's a component that you can add anywhere. But yeah, so basically the camera component is on this vehicle, but this one is without the camera. Just because I thought that if you ever want to derive from those blueprints instead of creating your own from scratch, you may want to use some of your own camera. So they are exactly the same. It's just this one doesn't have a camera. So I open up the camera one, and you can see it's got the initialized cameras kind of a thing. Yeah, so those are the cameras that are some basic camera setup for like initialization and stuff when you possess this, because if you wanted to change vehicles, you need to possess them, unpossess, and then you kind of disable the camera so that they don't tick. So this setup handles it by default. It's all good here. But yeah, as of the vehicle, as you can see, it's already got its wheels. So, and the camera, there is a rear camera and the front camera. If you wanted to take a look, I don't even remember how to enable this one, but I guess yeah. So basic setup is this one derives from C++ called Skeletal Arcade Vehicle Pawn. Of course, as I said, they're gonna split apart in C++ to make them more optimal, so that they don't have a lot of if statements checking whether or not this is skeletal or this is static. It's just the skeletal has this logic for animations, and static has this the other logic for the animation. So the skeletals are pretty much all you want to set up is usually just obviously vehicle mesh and the animation here. You also want to have the camera set up here, and there is some this is basically spring arm component pretty much for the cameras, but this one, the front camera, it's more advanced. That's the one that I've coded fully. So this is front camera controller, and it has some kind of cool features for the vehicles. It has rotation snapping, so that when you kind of move the mouse around the car, I will show you in a bit, and you leave off the mouse, it will kind of go back, snap back to the back of the vehicle after given time, so rotation snapping delay. I will be showing that in a bit anyway, the setup. And there is also four static mesh components, and they are just wheels. So this is really just a static mesh component, nothing fancy. And so if you want to set up those wheels, you obviously just set the static meshes accordingly and attach those to each socket. So basically you have those sockets here that I showed you before. Those are accessible the same way in static mesh vehicles. And the final piece is the movement component, which is basically the whole logic of the vehicle. So usually you don't want to be worried about most of the settings except for the vehicle settings. You get the vehicle settings, and then it's split apart into like physics stuff, stabilization, force, friction, and a bunch of stuff. All of those settings are well commented. Usually when you hover over them, there will be some comments in there, so worth to take a look at this. Engine, obviously the curves, as I mentioned before. There is also steering stuff, and there is also suspension. And suspension is probably the most important at the beginning. As you can see, when I highlighted this component, you can see those red lines here. This is basically a setup for the suspension. Trace length, it just basically, because those, as I said, those vehicles are fully arcade, they're not physical vehicles, so they are kind of driven by the code logic, not the physics. And so those traces are basically shooting down to the ground, taking a look where whether there is a ground on the bottom or not, and then the suspension is calculated based on that. So basically you can, depending, when you, for example, jump from the cliff or something, and if the trace, or jump from the little hill or something, and so that the vehicle is kind of detached from the ground, you can make the vehicle snap to the ground all the time if you want to for your game. So you can extend those traces, and then they will kind of keep the vehicle close to the ground at all times, which is cool. And trace thickness by default is, as you can see, just a line trace, but I highly recommend using something bigger than that. Usually there is like little bumps in the road or something, and it's usually very, very nice to have at least like 5 centimeters or something trace, so that it's a little bit thicker, so it doesn't kind of jump around when there is like tiny gap somewhere or something like this. So I do recommend using that. Suspension parent bone, this refers to the suspension bone that I showed before in the skeletal mesh. So you've got a suspension bone. So basically just telling the system, this is the suspension bone. You can play around with this bone for the suspension bouncing stuff. And then springs, so you set up the actual springs for each wheel. So you get, and again, those are corresponding to the name of the bone. That's important as well. And yeah, it's basically all of those are also commented, so it's pretty easy to set up. Yeah, I'm just not gonna go too much into details of this right now because this video will take hours. So what I'm gonna do now, in order to drive something, because this is, as you saw, this is empty project, so I can go into the game and I'm flying, there's nothing here. The simplest way to do it, we're gonna go with a few steps. I'm gonna go to static vehicles, because static vehicles, I will be using those really. For example, sport car, and if I open up the blueprint, as you can see, with the static mesh cars, they're very much the same, but there's just slight difference. So the vehicle mesh here is the physical representation. As you can see, this is, it should be at least, yep, its visibility is disabled. So this is physics for the static mesh. So it should be set to the same static mesh as you have for the rendering, but it has the collisions enabled on it. but it's the visibility is disabled. That's just some necessary setup for the static meshes, because we want the body of the car to move when you to tilt and to bounce on the suspension, and we cannot do it properly if the vehicle is moved by the code. I don't want to get too much technical into this, but that was some kind of limitation that I hit. So you've got the static mesh that simulates physics, and then you have a vehicle visual mesh, which is just, it's got no collisions at all, but it has but it's a visible mesh, and it's the same mesh. So yeah, it shouldn't be much of a problem. The camera setup is the same, and then the wheel setup is exactly the same, and there is a movement component, and this movement component is actually set up for the static meshes. But yeah, there is, as you can see, the other car also had those green lines. It's not that it's just on this car, but it's just that the way that the springs are set up for this car, it will be visible. Basically, if you go to movement component, you will see in the vehicle settings that it's using actually the swing pivot and in swing arm. So basically, when you go up and down with the car suspension, it will kind of allow you to rotate the wheels in this axis. So basically, it will kind of, you can, I don't even remember which one was that. Yeah, so you can tweak how much the wheels are swinging. But it's a good setup for this car, so I'm gonna leave it. And so, first of all, we need a couple of inputs because it's an empty project. You probably have inputs in your project already, but just for the sake of completeness of this tutorial, I'm just gonna go with everything. So the movement of the vehicle, which is like forward, backward, the acceleration, braking, and turning, and the camera movements, they are all axis mappings. So basically, I'm gonna go forward, backward, and forward will be W, and the backward will be S. Then I'm gonna add another one, which is gonna be left, right, and left is A, and left is gonna be -1. Yeah, backwards -1. So that it basically this multiplies the input that you put from the keyboard or from the controller or anything, because it's also supported by the controllers. You can use, I don't know, Xbox controller to do this stuff. So left is -1, and then turning right is 1. Not this one. And another input that we'll need is camera horizontal. It's gonna be mouse X, and then we're gonna have a camera vertical mouse Y, and it's gonna be -1 for some reasons. I just know it, and just for the completeness, I'm gonna add another input here, and it's gonna be a drift. And let's make it a space bar. Cool. And as you can see, the drift is actually action mappings, not the axis mappings, because drift is just driven by on-off kind of logic. So you either are drifting or you're not. You cannot half drift, at least in this system of the vehicles. So yeah, that's the input setup. I'll close it now. I'm gonna create blueprint based on the plugin blueprint here. So I'm gonna create a blueprint class. Let's see, static sport car. I want the one with the camera because yeah, it will be just easier to show you something. So PP sport sport car. That's the setup. So as you can see, you've got already everything set up here. The only thing that's missing is the input. But yeah, actually not only. I don't want to set up the game mode right now, and I think you probably know how to set up the game mode in default pawn. So the quicker way will be to just, or actually I'll do it later. So let's carry on with the inputs first. So the input forward, backward, that's one input. Left to right input, drift input, camera horizontal and the camera vertical. And yeah, so I've got those inputs that I created, and I'm gonna go ahead and so inputs for this vehicle system, because it's networked, then we're gonna be kind of using the special functions that I have for the inputs. So moving forward and backward, you can either highlight the movement component, or just can do it like this. So you can do set input, or maybe it will be easier if I grab the component, so it will be better for the context. So set input, and you can see there is 4 inputs for the vehicle system: acceleration, drift, stabilization, and turning. So this is forward, backward, so I'm gonna go with the acceleration. Acceleration includes braking as well. So if you press S on the keyboard, this axis value will be -1. If you press W, it will be 1. So it will kind of calculate acceleration versus braking that way. I'm gonna grab the component again and then set input, and we're gonna do turning input for the left and right, A and D. So you got the inputs here, and then also for the drifting, set drift input, and I'm gonna have 2 of those. So when the drift input key is pressed, we enable it, and when it's released, we disable it. That's pretty much what I want to have it with that. And also there is a camera stuff. So I want to use the front camera here, camera controller, camera, set input. No, how was it? Oh yeah, it's a horizontal camera, so audio input. And there is also the vertical camera, so up and down. Set pitch input. Add pitch input. So it's gonna be up and down. So that's the input setup for the basic vehicle. And I should be able to drop it to the level now. And if I join the game, it's still, I can just watch it for now. But if you like highlight the vehicle here, you should be able to go to details panel and kind of find possess and auto possess player 0. That's not vehicles feature, that's the Unreal feature. I'm just saying for those who are not familiar with the Unreal Engine. So auto possess player 0, and if I go into the game, you can see I'm moving my mouse and there is a vehicle. As you can see, when I move my mouse, it kind of, the camera is very smooth. It kind of slows down a bit. It doesn't snap hard. There's also settings for this, so you can see I can turn the wheels now, move back, move forward. You can see the camera snapping that I was talking about before. It's basically this. I can turn around my mouse. It will kind of go back. See, I'm moving around the mouse. As long as I'm moving around, nothing happens. But if I move around and leave it, it will go back to the back of the car. And especially it will go back even faster when you start driving. So yeah, that's it. You've got the setup for the car. Don't worry about the wheels looking weird when they're spinning. That's the yeah, Unreal Engine motion blur amounts. How much is it currently? Okay, let's put it to 0 for now. Yeah, so basically, as you can see, I'm drifting. I can turn. Everything seems to work quite good. Press spacebar. Okay, I'm able to drift. And so yeah, that would be it for the very simple setup for the vehicle. I can maybe talk a little bit about some settings right here now. It should be quite quick and simple to just show you a few bits to play around. You should be able to find, for example, the front camera component. You can use rotation snapping, as you can see. So I disable this feature, and you will see that whatever I do, the camera is not going back for the vehicle. So I can just turn around the camera, it never goes back. So that's it for the camera stuff. What else? The pitch helper in the camera component, it's also quite a cool thing. There's also, there's also a delay after how much time needs to pass until the camera starts snapping back to the back of the car. So you can set it up for like 1 second or something. There is a half second right now. So the pitch helper that is enabled by default, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to show it to you. No, yeah, it might be here somewhere. So basically, let's say I'm looking down like this, right? And I'm not using my mouse at all right now, and I'm kind of trying to access some high. You can see camera goes up automatically, and when I go down, it will kind of go down automatically as well. So it kind of, this is the feature that allows you to adjust the view to whatever surroundings there are. So if in front of the car there is a large hill, the camera automatically goes up. If you're kind of reversing and there's, you keep looking up, and then you want the car to, you want still to be able to see what's in front of you, the camera goes automatically down. So this is completely controlled by the camera system. Pretty cool. A lot of games have this kind of feature, so there you go. So there is some settings for the snapping as well. For the pitch helper, you get pitch snapping speed, so how fast this snapping goes. So these are settings for the pitch helper. This is setting what's the angle of the heel that needs to be to trigger certain pitch helper features. So this is also completely adjustable. Those speed effects, we're not going to talk about this right now. That's pretty much it for the camera stuff. Out of the movement component, I should be able to go. Just try to remember like how the car accelerates. Pretty slow, but I can actually go to, for example, engine. And maybe do the acceleration curve. I'm gonna just quickly grab the entire curve and then just check it up like that, and it should be able to accelerate much better. As you can see now, it's kind of difficult to control. It's pretty fast accelerating car right now. So that would be for the acceleration curve. I'm not changing honestly, so feel free to play around with those. I really do not want to go through every single setting right now. There is some networking settings as well, but I guess those are pretty good. Then you have movement component. What else? Yeah, there's. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to show you this, but should be able to, I guess. So if I move the car right now, you can see its physics moves. So you can basically just jump into the simulation game. You can go here and do simulate, and you should be able to play around with the physics of the vehicle a little bit. You cannot change it at runtime like that, but So with this, the green lines that I showed you before, you should be able, yeah, because these ones are now rotated during the game. With the wheels tilting, this is what I'm talking about. So when the wheels kind of lift off the ground, they kind of are, rotating a little bit in that axis. So, and if you kind of push it downwards, they go inside. So this is also something that is adjustable by the system. You can go to the vehicle component, suspension, for example, say that front left, let's do front right, which is just this wheel. So I'm going to front right wheel, and I should be able to, let's say, swing min and max. So let's say from minus 15. Sorry, no, it's the other way around. Yeah, so it's from 15 to minus 15. Then potentially this should cause this vehicle to, just this wheel to behave a little bit differently from the other wheels. So it's already visible very much. Just take a look at the rear one and the front one. This one is already tilted much more than the other wheels. And also this direction. And actually this looks pretty cool. So I should be able to set up both 15 and minus 15. And this is opposite for front and rear wheels. Sorry, left and right wheels. So this is minus 15 and 15 because it's a left wheel. So it's the opposite side. This is right wheel, that's why it's minus is on this side. 15 minus 15. This is left, so it's gonna be minus 15, 15. The reason why I know it is because you can take a look how it's set up by default. The right side is minus, left side is positive. Yeah, that's pretty much all you need to. Yeah, there you go. Now they're pretty swingy, I guess you could say. Yep, they're quite good. Wondering how it feels now to drive it. Well, they're already kind of going outwards. It's nice. It looks good. Yeah, at least in my opinion. So yeah, feel free to play around with it, set it up the way you want, and maybe share what you've done with the setup of the plugin. You can see, yeah, there's just quick disclaimer. I just wanted to add something to the video quickly, just to show you that the networking is working. So I'm gonna go to blueprints and create a game mode. If you have already your game mode, you don't need to do this, but create BP vehicles mode, something like that. I'm gonna create this game mode, and therefore this game mode will have BP, my sport car that I created, blueprint as a default pawn class. And that way I can actually jump into the game with the listen server net mode, and it should work now. Oh yeah, I need to change the game mode in the level of vehicles mode, and then I'm gonna jump into the game. You should be able to see those vehicles running. Yep, that's not how they were supposed to do things, but yeah, maybe I can move on from here a little bit. Yeah, there's another screen over here. You can see that the networking just works by default. I haven't changed any settings in the blueprint. They are replicated by default, so this is all visible for you in the other viewport. Should be networking is pretty good for this. Should be quite accurate, and should work quite alright with even some larger lag as well. So So yeah, that should be right. So that would be it for the video. So thanks for watching.